Hello everyone, I'm David D. Hilster, president of the John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society. During the past 2 years, we have used annual fundraising drives in order to keep our organization's presence alive and well on the internet. Both years we have been successful in that the monies collected have been enough to keep us afloat. This year is our third annual online fundraiser, and once again we are counting on your support. But first, I want to thank everyone who pays their annual memberships through our automatic online system. Your support is vital and provides us with important funds to keep the CMPS afloat. Hopefully, as we continue to grow, we will be gaining more and more automatic memberships so that these fundraising events won't be necessary. But we are not quite there yet. This year, we will be implementing several changes to our online system. Several to save money and lower our annual expenses, and another to better our discussion platform. First, we will be moving our websites and databases to another server that has graciously volunteered to host us at a much reduced rate. It currently costs us $1,400 a year for our dedicated server, given that we need complete control over our own software. The new server will give us and allow us that control, but only for $250 a year. Second, we will be moving away from BuddyPress, which is a Facebook-like plugin for WordPress, to using Discourse. BuddyPress was an interesting experiment, but the upkeep of the plugin and its general design don't really fit what we need. What we need is a robust and well-accepted discussion forum, and that is why we'll be moving our online discussions to Discourse. It costs $20 a month, which is half the price of BuddyPress. I think those currently active in our online discussions will find this new platform much more enjoyable and functional. Third, we are moving to a free version of Overleaf, which eliminates a $33 monthly fee. Overleaf was useful for us when we were publishing our own proceedings for conferences, but that is no longer needed. Our goal this year is $2,000, and I hope we can reach that goal. Whatever amount you can donate, it is greatly appreciated and needed. Your membership and donations are vital to keeping our online community of critical thinkers alive and well. To donate, go to fund.naturalphilosophy.org. That is fund, F-U-N-D.naturalphilosophy.org. Thank you, and keep up the amazing work that is driving science forward.
Hello.
Hello everyone, I'm David D. Hilster.
Hello, Billy. So, welcome to another exciting Saturday session of John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society. At the stage, Today's discussion will be about, did academia experience a soft sell regarding Einstein's relativity? So I've stumbled across this term called soft sunset, where it's a tactic used to get rid of people by employers on employees that they don't want. So did academia use that same sort of tactic on people who were dissenting against Einstein's relativity? Because if you go back to when Einstein first started off, there was a lot of dissent against Einstein's relativity, and so you had people who were in academia disagreeing with it, but then suddenly all of academia seems to be mostly united in believing Einstein's relativity without there being much dissent within academia about it. And so was academia subjected to this tactic of the soft sunset. So that's pointing it out in this slide. Might there be a range of different opinions, but it seems mainstream establishment is fairly united in accepting Einstein's relativity. How was such an inequality achieved? and was the tactic then used of the soft sunset. So one of the places I've stumbled across this sort of idea, they don't actually use the word soft sunset in this, but it seems to be the same sort of tactic. And it's this television series called Doomwatch. It was made in the 1970s. It's a fictional series, and it's about a scientific government agency responsible for investigating and combating various environmental and technological dangers. And it ranged across a lot of scientific issues. So even though it was a drama, it was dealing with real life science issues. Let's see. Right, I can bring up my video now. Video clip. Let me move that one and add that one. There you go. So in this video clip, it's about a scientist. You can tell who the scientist is because he's wearing a white coat. And he came to work one day at this. He was employed by his company, and he came to work one day and he found his car parking space had disappeared. It was no longer there. So he went in to complain about that, and he wasn't able to talk to anybody in charge because they were too busy. And then later on, he found out his telephone had been removed from his office. He was no longer having a telephone, so he went to complain about that, and there was nobody available in charge to talk to him about that. And then one day he comes to work, he meets somebody who's on the right here. It's on my right, hopefully it's the same as you. And he says, well, let's come into my office and we have a chat. So I'll show you the clip now. Oh.
Yeah, good Lord. Oh, Lord, I'm sorry, didn't I? I'm so busy just at the moment. I don't know whether I... Well, look, come into my study. A thesis, you say? What's in it? You see? What is this? The partition's gone. Everything. Where's my desk? And who the hell are you? Ren? Yes.
So I'll just play it again. I think the sound's a bit low.
Yeah, good Lord. Oh, Lord, I'm sorry, didn't I? I'm so busy just at the moment. I don't know whether I... Well, look, come into my study. A thesis, you say? What's in it? You see? What is this? The partition's gone. Everything. Where's my desk? And who the hell are you? Where's Mitchell? Ren? Yes.
So there you are. To move that. So he goes into his into his study or his office, and he finds it's not there, and there's some strange woman there he's never met before. And so the tactic being used there is what is called soft sunset. He's just trying to irritate him, and hopefully he gets so irritated that he will resign. If I can now bring up the next video on this. So hold on a minute. Move. Percent. Stop share. That next one. Percent. So in this clip, these two men they discuss what's been happening to this scientist, the one wearing the white coat, what's happening to him, where this white man in the white coat, the scientist, is suddenly finding his office has disappeared, his car parking space has disappeared. So what's all that supposed to be about? And they're discussing that. So let's start that clip.
Standard procedure in the States. What's standard procedure? A man's usefulness goes. But so as to upset the unions or the professional organizations, they get rid of him by reducing his morale. He resigns and everybody's happy. Happy? Of course, if he complains, they detrain him. What? Detrain. Equip him for work in a less skilled capacity, which is what will happen to you, mate, if you go on as you are doing. Okay, let's forget all about it.
So that's quite interesting. If an employer has an employee and they don't want that employee anymore, what they will do is try to ruin his morale and hope that the person will resign. So it's sort of like a soft sunset. You don't want to get into a problem of firing a person. You want the person to resign. So if I hold on a minute and I get back to where I was at the screen. So that was on the TV series about called Doomwatch. I can't find a decent reference for this, but I checked with artificial intelligence, and it says soft sunsetting in a regulatory or IT context, that's information technology, refers to a gradual or phased removal or discontinuation of a regulation, service, or feature rather than a sudden complete end. So you're trying to phase something out. In this case, I've just shown you, they had a scientist and the company wanted to phase him out. They didn't have any use for him anymore, and so they wanted to upset him so much that the person would resign. So I look at rather interesting things, and this is about these scientists are talking about UFOs and things, and they bring up the issue of soft sunset. And I want something to click then. So first person talking is an Eric Einstein. He's received a PhD in mathematical physics from Harvard University in 1992, and so forth. So that's what Wikipedia says about him. And the other person is Avi Loebi. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's in Harvard, Harvard astronomer and so forth. So it's these two scientists, and they're having a serious talk about UFOs and that, and they bring up this issue of soft sunset. So I want to bring up the video on what they say about that. Present share screen. First of all, I should get rid of the cancel. Got to remove that. First of all, I have to remove that, and then I'm going to share this next video. Share. Okay.
So
No, I didn't.
what he said was that he was given a courtesy heads up as a billionaire. Do not invest in AI. AI startups will not be allowed to be a thing. We are going to choose a couple of winners. We are going to make them giant corporations, and we will put them in a federal cocoon. And when Andreessen and Horowitz said back, I don't know how you're going to do this, because that would mean that you'd have to classify mathematics, which is being taught everywhere, and you can't classify math. They said, we took entire segments of theoretical physics offline during the Cold War, and they went dark. Now, the interesting thing is that there is absolutely no record of any physicist that I know being told this, hey, we're going to take portions of theoretical physics and we're going to make them go dark. So the key question here is, if that's true, did the federal government pull off what in corporate consulting is called, management consulting, is called a soft sunset? A soft sunset is one in which you do not alert the people who are being downsized that they are being taken offline. You want the people to think that they are still working on important problems, and they don't even realize that they are being phased out, they're being sunsetted. So the question is, what was Mark Andreessen talking about when it came to the White House's comments on theoretical physics? And is our lack of ability to move the Lagrangian of the universe beyond 1973 part of a soft sunset of theoretical physics? Because that's exactly the time when quantum gravity is debuted as a concept. You don't find essentially any mention of quantum gravity before the early 1970s if you look at Google Ngrams. So the key question is, did we get soft sunsetted? Is there, in chemistry, you have a concept of an inhibitor, which is something you add to a ongoing reaction to stop the reaction. Imagine that effectively what we had was theoretical physicists hitting it out of the park, and then suddenly they became very unsuccessful. At exactly that moment, we start to see the appearance of quantum gravity. And then 10 years later, we see the appearance of string theory. Did we get soft sunsetted, and we didn't get the courtesy call that Andreessen and Horowitz did?
What do you think, Avi?
Well, I think we should ask, I just heard the person who spoke with Andreessen in the Biden White House, who was asked exactly this question about what they were talking about today in a podcast. We can ask that person what the discussion was about.
Can you say what it was?
It was a podcast with Ezra Klein, with the person who was in charge of AI in the White House. During the Biden administration, the meeting was, around April 2024. I think we should approach, these people and get more details. Now, the question is, should we push government to reveal what is what is under wraps? What kind of physics has been hidden? Is it related to UAP? Is it related to new physics that the government knows about and wants to take advantage of in some ways? That would require a very efficient coordination, and also, even the Manhattan Project had spies in it, so somehow it leaked. It's just hard for me to tell whether the government is competent enough to put a seal on a very important scientific discovery. I don't know what Eric thinks, but my fundamental belief is the government is not competent enough to do that. But maybe Eric thinks otherwise.
Well, I think that the story, again, you and I have both been tracking it when most of our PhD brethren will not. Is roughly speaking that between 1952 and 1970-ish, 71, there was this golden age of general relativity that was largely funded by two people who looked like CIA cutouts, Roger Babson and Agnew Bainson. They worked particularly with Bryce DeWitt and Lewis Witten. There was an entire coordinated series of places that were working on gravity for engineering purposes. A lot of this got pushed out into aerospace companies, which is not a natural home for theoretical physics, but in particular, the Glenn L. Martin Company of Baltimore was where Lewis Witten was posted. And I would say that Curtis Wright was where Feynman was probably going in his story, Any Questions, where he's giving physics lectures to aerospace people. So whatever this
surely
was,
you're joking, Mr. Feynman, where he's in a taxi cab and he tells the driver,
Yeah,
But
tell me a place. He goes to the Alibi Room in Buffalo, New York. I think that's Curtis Wright Aerospace.
Mhm.
But
So-
Eric, do you think we should add that to the JFK, MLK, RFK
MLK,
files that should
Epstein.
be released?
Avi, if you go back to my appearance on Joe Rogan's program, episode 1945, the year of the Trinity test, coincidentally, you'll see that I've basically been tracking this, and that story has now spread. Jesse Michaels has been spreading it. I would say David Kaiser knew about some of the story independently. But more or less, yes, the golden age of general relativity is probably involved with some attempt at something like primitive space-time engineering. There's a 1971 Australian intelligence document by a physicist who talks about Dyson, Oppenheimer, DeWitt, Desser, a bunch of well-known people to all of us being involved with this. I don't think it was hyper successful, to be entirely honest. We know that the 1957 Chapel Hill conference had Feynman coming to it under the assumed name of Mr. Smith. So it's really weird behavior. Herman Bondi talked very clearly about removing the positivity constraints from general relativity to allow.
I spoke about this a couple of hours ago on this podcast. Yes.
Okay. All of these things had not been talked about much in recent years. And my feeling is I'm trying to get people to open the kimono as to were Babson and Bainson actually cutouts for CIA funding. And then you had these two charismatic, mysterious funders who couldn't be traced to the government. And did we move a lot of this stuff into aerospace? Because the one lesson of the Manhattan years, Avi, as you probably know, is that the best way to keep a secret is compartmentalization. Only the white badges knew what was going on at Los Alamos. Everyone else merely had a fragment.
Eric, we were talking before you came on about AI and effectively how it's sort of training us. And you've talked about.
So that's basically it. Was it the CIA sort of operation to make parts of physics go dark? And we live in what we think is an open society where you can discuss anything you want to, but is it really? They used a tactic called soft sunset to control academia, and so academia is now biased towards accepting Einstein's relativity without there being allowed dissent against it. Because we in the distant community, many of us think Einstein's relativity is wrong, and we're quite surprised that there's not more voices in academia saying the same sort of thing as us. And so was it just a tactic used to cover all these sort of things up? And so I got the transcript of the talking they gave there. They talk about a lot of other interesting things, but in this talk today that I'm only presenting the interesting bit about soft sunset. So the question raised by it is, was fundamental physics soft sunsetted? And it's sort of, isn't there a danger of the same thing happening? I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. It's what's happened with Mr. Epstein, which we talked about, you know, and it's sort of Mr. Epstein is the person who died mysteriously in jail and was involved in having sex with underage girls on his island. And a lot of influential people are involved in that. This sort of thing spreads out into different areas. Is soft sunsetting used in academia and similar techniques used outside of academia in the rest of society. And when you look into the area of JFK, well, he was assassinated, but was it more than one person? And you end up then going into conspiracy theories, and you had other people who were killed at the same time. So, and you end up with conspiracy theories of those people as well. And so this all comes about via that climate of conspiracy theories. Where's it? Where is it? Yeah, so this is the way he points out, Arville points out about, do you think we should add this conspiracy theory of theoretical physics? Should we add it to the other conspiracy theories of JFK, Martin Luther King, MLK, RFK, Robert Kennedy, and so forth? So you had the era of all these conspiracy theories happening, and theoretical physics might be subjected to the same sort of conspiracy theory. We came out of World War II, and we went straight into a Cold War, and people might have decided, oh, we have to start covering up things, and that's what they might have done. They might have decided, let's start covering up things in theoretical physics. So thank you. That's the end of that. I'll just now open it up to anybody who wants to talk about things. So if I can present, if I can stop screen, yeah. So, okay. I'll look at the comments and see what people have been saying. If you could please mention my name at the comments, and I know you're talking about what I've just presented, instead of what normally happens as you talk among yourselves. So I'll just go through the comments to see if there's anything addressed to me. What's comment was maybe that Roger sounds very good. That's good. If I'm show. Hey, so that's the wrong one. I'll go on to the other one. So this person, Serena, says Roger sounds very good. Excellent. So I'll just remove my slides from the screen. Yes. Yeah, Roger sounds very good. Excellent. Thank you. I couldn't scientist. This one is so this question is, why couldn't scientists counteract a possible soft sunset and just continue pursuing their work? Well, I think most of the time they don't. The idea of soft sunset is to do it by stealth. You get rid of people, and the people who've been subjected to it don't really know what's going on. In the case of the Doomwatch scientist, he was they were trying to get rid of him by getting him irritated, and he would just resign. And so it's part of this psychological trick of trying to get people to leave and not really realize what's going on. And if it happens to if they just aim their attention at one person and don't aim it at everybody, then they can persecute one person to leave, and when they've knocked him out, they could go on to knock out the next person. So this person thinks that Einstein and Keating are not very reliable sources. Okay. Most of people. Okay. Something like Keating's in charge of big experiments. To this person and Cook have, and he's a professor in San Diego. Right. So the question is, there have been a lot of conspiracy in the past, though. How to know for sure? Well, the people doing the conspiracy are the ones that know what they're doing. So the agencies like CIA are not open to say what they're doing. Yeah. So this person points out UFOs are real. Keating anti-vaxxers are legit. Weinstein has a grudge against academia because no one believes that the dog ate his brilliant theory. Okay, yeah. So, most of the time, the funding do not go to the smartest ideas or better people. Why? I don't know. Why the 1800s? There have been plenty of conspiracies since then. Well, the conspiracies, I think, mean 1900s. 1900s conspiracies seem to really take off. You got the Hitler thing. I've looked into the things with these First and Second World War, and a lot of it, you get propaganda going on. You get from the propaganda side, the First World War, the blame for that was put on Germany, and Germany, from their propaganda side, they were forced to take action because they were feeling themselves surrounded by enemies, and it was all triggered by the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, and that was conspiracy. There was people, a group of people who were trying to assassinate the Archduke, and one of them managed to be successful. And the events from that sort of like triggered the First World War. So you've got conspiracy, an actual conspiracy, not just a theory, of starting the First World War. And then after the First World War, Germany was upset about losing that war, and then they start another one, World War II, and lots of things happen then where Hitler invades Poland. From his point of view, he says, well, he was being attacked by Poland, so he has to invade Poland. But from the Allies side, England and France, they're saying, no, that's just what in our terms now would be a false flag. So the Hitler lied for why he had to invade Poland. So we end up with World War II starting, one side saying one thing and the other side saying something else. and England and France are saying, "Oh, Hitler's lying," and it just escalates from that. You end up with conspiracy theories that come out from the propaganda. And then after World War II, you end up in the Cold War between the West and the Soviet Union, and you're getting lots more propaganda going on there. Did they sunset Einstein? I know, well, probably to some extent, because Einstein was disputing quantum physics, and they didn't go with his dispute against quantum physics, so he was soft sunsetted on that. But people who were going against Einstein's relativity, it looks like they were soft sunsetted as well. Yeah. The theories of they couldn't have soft sunsetted Einstein. Yeah, his theories became famous from about 1919 onwards. There was a lot of propaganda being put forward, or advertising for how wonderful Einstein's relativity was. But they went with how wonderful Einstein's relativity was, but they didn't then go with Einstein's ideas about quantum physics, because Einstein was opposed to quantum physics. So, yeah. This is, I think most scientists are followers rather than leaders. They don't want to tackle Einstein's theories. They're worried about being judged badly. Yeah. Roger. Okay. Roger, I think most scientists are followers rather than leaders. They don't want to tackle Einstein's relativity. Yeah, they're worried about being judged. No, that's Einstein's challenged every day. Yeah, well, we in the distant community, those who don't believe in Einstein's relativity, point out those experiments are being misinterpreted. Yeah, countless prominent physicists have challenged Einstein's relativity, and they've sort of actually passed over, ignored. Yeah. Mainstream is more established, and universities don't tolerate any dissent. Yeah, that seems to be it. You've got to follow the dogma. No, relativity isn't used daily. We've had examples like GPS engineer Ron Hatch points out it wasn't used, but the propaganda is that GPS uses relativity, and that's false. When the engineers working on it don't use it. How many students would you say question Einstein at universities? They're taught it was established fact, and you don't fall in line, you can't expect a career in physics. Well, I point back when I was doing a physics degree, I was much more trusting, and the physics teachers that they tell you that these things were established by experiment, and so you're just taking their word for it. And then when you actually start reading into the literature on these physics experiments, you find out that the teachers are misinforming you. They're telling you these Einstein's relativity is confirmed by experiment when it isn't. No. The oil industry uses nuclear physics, which is based on relativity, to take rock layers, liquid oil. They don't use just dig. Now that's just propaganda, probably. When you start looking into all these things, it's just propaganda by the people who want to believe in relativity. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, there's a Professor Harlan points out GPS do not use relativity, and that's right. One Hatch just pointed that out. It's just propaganda. You get the people who believe in relativity, and they tell you that GPS works by relativity, but when you actually look into it, you find out it doesn't. So the mainstream just want to misrepresent experiments. Yep. Relativity. Another comment by him. Yeah. So another person also points out relativity hinders the development of electromagnetism. Yeah, that's right. So if they've messed up talking about electromagnetic theory by bringing on this relativity thing into it. Okay, so I'm up to date on the comments there, I think, and so hide that. So, has anybody got their hand up in the green room? So, oh, okay. Hide it. Okay, you're muted at the moment. You're muted. Okay.
Actually, there is a lot of hard evidence to people being soft sunsetted, as you have alluded to earlier. But I'll also mention that there's quite a few evidences that we in the CNPS and people of the old NPA are quite familiar with firsthand. Quite a few examples of hard sunsetting. For example, Bill Lucas, extremely well read in physics, etc., and brilliant mind, great aptitude for physics. He was on the payroll of the University of offhand, I forget the name of it, but when he became anti-relativity, the head of the physics department got a call from the government saying, Lucas must be fired immediately or university will get no more government funding. So he called in Bill, explained the situation, told him how sad he was, and fired Bill. And as a courtesy to him, continued to pay him for a while until he had the university pay him, since he was being fired unfairly, until he got another paying job. You also have a similar story from think of the name, out of Australia, who was actually he found a fallacious bit of logic in general relativity, and it would actually be to general relativity's advantage to correct it. But since they considered this anti-general relativity, he was fired from his university. So there were a number of people who, when we were in the NPA, were working on real world projects, and they would come in and tell us, we don't use relativity. We got to get this thing to work. But on the surface, they would say it was whether we're using relativity. But if you want to get some of these things to work, you don't use relativity. Now, there are a number of examples like general relativity and the very start of GPS, where if you used an equation that looked like general relativistic equation, you could get the right numerical answer. But if and only if you used it in an entirely anti-relativity equation, namely you use it as a preferred frame theory, and where for both GPS and CERN, independently, they found out that the GCI was the preferred frame in the vicinity of the Earth. So some still quite honestly think they're using relativity, but they're using an equation that looks like relativity, but it's not. And the interpretation of the data is not consistent with relativity. And, Ron Hatch's 30 plus patents with GPS says that rather than using special relativity, GPS disproves special relativity. Thank you, Roger.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I just bring up this. I got some other slide I want to show. I'll bring up this up for a moment. Where's Eastern? Yeah, so if I bring up this slide, I'll bring you down. Okay, we move. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll bring up another slide. So it takes me some time to call these things up. Share screen. Wikipedia. Yeah. So okay, so got an example here of Louis Easton. He was, as I read it, he was an English physicist whose most notable achievements were in the precise measurement of time and the determination of the speed of light. He was a critic of Einstein's theory of relativity, particularly as it related to time dilation. So he was a big critic of Einstein's relativity, and he leaves. He unfortunately dies, and there's no sort of new generation of physicists then coming in and being taking up the cause of people like Louis Easton, who are critics of relativity. So when they let the critics die, and then they don't want any more critics to suddenly come up within academia. So that's sort of like another phasing out of it. Phase out the existing critics as much as you can, and don't let any new critics come in. If I can bring up another slide of his. Stop screen. Present. Share screen. That one. Yeah. So this is an article by Louis Easton, and he's basically pointing out that relativity is a joke or swindle. In the article, he's written here, and he says, some of my contributors, this is the article he's written, find it difficult to accept my contention that Einstein's theory of relativity is invalidated by its internal errors. Butterfield, for example, denies there is any duplication of units or any harm in obtaining results from thought experiments. Moreover, if my contention is correct, the new experimental work described by Anderton is not required to disprove the theory, although it might confirm that his assumptions were wrong. This is not to suggest that experimental results are not important, but they should be considered as steps in development of new theories. So if we go back to the basic thing, he was saying that Einstein's relativity is invalidated by its internal errors. Yeah, that's what I have been trying to point out in several of my videos, that really it's just talking nonsense. So it's invalidated, but a point of view like Eason's has not been allowed to keep carrying on, that relativity is nonsense. That sort of point of view is not sort of allowed to keep being taught to the next generation. Instead, they want to keep saying that relativity is correct. They're not allowed they've made physics one-sided. They've tried to keep the supporters of relativity, and they've tried to get rid of the critics, and they've phased those critics out by using this method of soft sunset. I wasn't aware of this term soft sunset until Einstein brought it to my attention. Okay, you're back again. Okay. Yeah. Hello. Okay. I'll remove that down. Remove that. And I'll go back to see if there's any more comments being made. Okay. Thoughts on paper. I can't see where I've left off from last time. Yes. It's lying. Well, that's wrong. I disagree with that. When you sort of try to talk to these physicists who are dealing with these things, you find that you get a different story to what's presented in the textbook for Einstein's relativity. And in the film, which we made, Einstein Wrong by David D. Hilster, it's difficult to actually get to talk to these people, but when you get to talk to them, they do say things which contradict what's in the relativity textbooks. So, this one. Oh, come on. Oh. As you say, you accept the Big Bang Theory. No, the Big Bang Theory was sort of like going off on different directions there. From relativity, they come up with these things like the Big Bang Theory. So it's all sort of like building process, building on things which are false, to make more things that are false as well. Yeah, QCD, that's quantum chromodynamics. And And that all seems like a bodge. Oh. So mass increases just the relativistic energy, they're equivalent, so anything that is using relativistic energy is using mass increase. Well, you get physicists just saying that there's no relativistic mass increase. So that's contradictory. If I can find where that person was. It's just mass. Yeah, so bring up another one. So present. It takes a long time to put these things up. So, if we make it smaller. So this person, Don Lincoln, he's got this video channel, Fermilab, and he raised the question, is relativistic mass real? And he's saying there's no such thing as relativistic mass. And that's contrary to how I was taught relativity. You go back, they were telling me there was relativistic mass, and so suddenly these people who supposedly believe in relativity, next thing they're doing is saying there's no relativistic mass. So they're doing what I call moving the goalposts. They say one thing, and maybe years later they say the complete opposite. And so that indicates to me they don't really know what they're doing. They're just bodging things. And they just don't want to accept that they're just bodging things. They just carry on bodging things and pretend everything's all right. Next, you talk about so that's the channel for Don Lincoln. I'm trying to call up Don Lincoln. Don Lincoln. Don Lincoln. So Don Lincoln add to share screen. It's Don Lincoln. Share. Right. So this is Don Lincoln, and he's on Wikipedia, and it says that he's an American physicist, author, host of the YouTube channel Fermilab, and science communicator. He conducts research in particle physics at Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory and was an adjunct professor of physics at the University of Notre Dame, although he no longer affiliated with the university. He received a PhD in experimental particle physics from Rice University in 1994 and so forth. So he thinks he knows a lot about relativity. And so what he says about relativity is contradicting relativity in the way that I was taught relativity. But from his point of view, the people who believed that sort of thing had got relativity wrong. So it seems to be relativity goes under this revision process all the time, and it's just like all moving goalposts. So these relativity people say one thing one moment, and then somebody else will come along and say, no, that's wrong, relativity is something else. Okay. But if you look in the dissidence, physics dissidence, you go back to the very beginning and so forth, the distance, many of them will be saying there's no such thing as relativistic mass. So when somebody, Don Lincoln, who believes himself a supporter of relativity, comes along and says there is no relativistic mass, he's suddenly taking the point of view of one of the dissidents. Where did he go? Well, I know who Don Lincoln is. I don't know who Sarnak is. I could call it Sarnak. So, Sarnak. So, okay, present to Sarnak. Okay, so this is what Wikipedia says about Sarnak. So, George Sarnak, who lived from 1869 to 1928, was a French physicist who lent his name to the Sarnak effect, a phenomenon which is the basis of interferometers and ring laser gyroscopes, developed since the 1970s. And the interesting thing about the Sarnak effect is many dissidents that disagree with Einstein's relativity think the Sarnak effect disproves relativity, but then the problem becomes one of interpretation, because when the relativists talk about the speed of light being constant, are they talking about that speed having to be in one direction, i.e. linear, going in a straight line, or are they talking about light then going in the curve? Because in the experiment, you're sort of the Sarnak's experiment, you're dealing with light going around in the curve, and from that point of view, it's two different things. You've got light in a straight line, light in a curve, and the interpretation is that light in a curve can be variable, but light in a straight line is constant. So that means, well, if it's variable in a curve, then light speed isn't constant, would be what some distance argue. But then it gets very confusing about interpretation of that, of how do the people who believe in relativity interpret this idea that light speed is constant. So as a professor, and I'm no good at English, Halim, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. What energy question mark? Particle cell arrays do not generate energy. The simplest explanation of the gamma effect is nonlinear Lorentz force, stroke Ritz, and Ritz has his own theory. Ritz was sort of like an emitter theory or ballistic theory. So instead of treating it by special relativity, you have Ritz's theory. And that's all a very interesting theory to investigate. And so it's also an interesting idea that all this relativistic effect is just coming about by a simple bit of mathematical manipulation caused by fiddling around with the gamma effect. So the Sarnak effect in what let's see if we can call up the Sarnak effect. Yeah, so 20% that share screen. So this is the Sarnak effect. If I read it, so you have the experimental setup as per the figure 1 shown. It's a Sarnak interferometer. It says it's the Sarnak effect, also called Sarnak interference, named after French physicist Georges Sarnak, is a phenomenon encountered in an interferometer that is elicited by rotation. The Sarnak effect manifests itself in a setup called a ring interferometer or Sarnak interferometer. A beam of light is split and two beams are made to follow the same path but in opposite directions. On return to the point of entry, the two light beams are allowed to exit the ring and undergo interference. The relative phases of the two exiting beams and thus the position of the interference fringes are shifted according to the angular velocity of the apparatus. In other words, when the interferometer is at rest with respect to a non-rotating frame, the light takes the same amount of time to traverse the ring in either direction. However, when the interferometer system is spun, one beam of light has a longer path to travel than the other in order to complete one circuit of the mechanical frame, and so takes longer, resulting in a phase difference between the two beams. And so Georges Sarnak set up the experiment in 1913 in an attempt to prove the existence of ether that Einstein's theory of special relativity made superfluous. So from the distant point of view, the Sarnak effect disproves relativity. But from the people who believe in relativity, they take the point of view that it doesn't. So we have a difference of interpretation of that experiment. So the Professor Harlan points out, the Sarnak effect is used in GPS. Yeah, that's right. So from the point of view of many dissidents, the Sarnak effect disproves relativity, and so GPS doesn't work by relativity. That's one of the parts of it. I worked at NASA and used GPS for dose Marie measurements. I never heard of Sarnak. So, well, relativity is a very complicated subject. I find that when they talk relativity to me, they only gave a very simplified, dumbed down version of it. And when you read into more detail, you find all these extra things. And sometimes I suppose they miss out talking about the Sanac effect. I mean, ideally, I would like somebody who believes in relativity to tell me their point of view of the Sanac effect, because I disagree with it. What I understand of it, I think it shows light speed is not constant. But as I say, it's the problem of if light goes in a straight line, you could treat that as being constant. But if it curves, then what are you doing then? Because it's not going in a straight line. Are you then treating that as not constant, or are you still trying to treat it as constant? So it's a very arguable thing. Yeah. So Professor Harlan points out we can replicate Sanac effect numerically by using Maxwell's equations without using Lorentz transformation. Yeah. So Lorentz transformation seems just to be another fudge about things. So Professor Harlan says they use a straight line in the Michelson-Gale experiment. That's another experiment. He says the idea that it needs to be circular is from analysis. So I think it's so it's all arguable, these different experiments. I wasn't okay. Andrew said I wasn't doing research GPS. Yeah, okay. So all these things end up being specialist subjects in the end. Okay. Professor Harlan says Michelson-1 experiment with the interferometer had a bias that was resolved with the Michelson-Gale interferometer experiment. So it'll be interesting to give a talk about that as well. So Raymond asks, Andrew, have you always been a supporter of GPS? And so Andrew says, since undergrad, I only ever had to use it more through grad school and my career. Well, that's interesting, because one of our physicist dissenters is Cynthia Whitney. Yeah. So if I had this one up, share screen. So this is interesting. Is one of our scientists that dissent with special with relativity is this person, Dr. Cynthia Whitney, and she was taught relativity, and then when she came to actually use relativity, she found it didn't work, and her course mentor said to her, of course it doesn't work, sort of thing. So she then rebelled against it. And so what it says here, she was a female with a PhD from MIT in physics and relativity, who is now a critic of relativity. If I can get the story down. So it says here that so it says here, okay, so you're a woman in the 1960s and you just got your PhD from MIT in relativity and you're ready to apply your work to your first practical application of being gyroscope. Only one big problem, relativity fails miserably at what is known as the Samick effect. And it says, read her Eureka story here. Hopefully I can pull it up. So, I have problems accessing that. But basically, when she came to actually do experiments with relativity, she found it didn't work. So, Andrew, you've had experiences with relativity and you think it works, but others have had experience with relativity and it just doesn't work. Next. Oh, come on. Michelson-Gell interferometer uses the same path for both light waves, but in the Michelson-Morley interferometer, the mirror in a transverse direction has a phase of reflection coefficient that varies with angle. And it says then, this introduces a phase bias in the measurement. Yeah, so basically, the relativity people, when they start interpreting the Michelson-Morley experiment as supporting relativity, they're wrong. It's an experiment which they are misinterpreting. Yeah. So this person points out modern physics has a philosophy problem. Their explanations of reality require virtual particles and non-existent mediums that possess real properties. And physics does have a philosophy problem. When they teach physics, which from my experience when I was doing my degree and so forth on it, they don't point out what philosophy modern physics is based upon. They sort of like miss all that out. If they taught that, then maybe people would be more skeptical of it, because the philosophy is very dubious. As I've done in some of my talks, the philosophy of modern physics is based upon is the doctrine of automatism. And that is the philosophical belief that physical reality is made out of particles. And when you get into the details of that philosophy, it's rather complicated, and not many people, if they just presented that philosophy, want to believe it. I think it's too ridiculous to be believed. So if Andrew says physics isn't a philosophy, that's wrong. It is based on philosophy. Aristotle came out entirely saying philosophical cosmology, it's 100% wrong compared to reality. Well, no. Aristotle, when I've looked into Aristotle, I found that he had been mistranslated. Okay, I've got Nick who wants to add to it. Hello, Nick.
Hi.
Hi.
Since Andrew Castro, using his scientific method, called me a liar in the displayed comments, and what you put up on the screen as well, and asked for references regarding CERN. I'll direct him to the works on time dilation by John Field of CERN on particle half-life at CERN. Thank you. Just wanted to make that comment and ask Andrew to use the real scientific method. Thanks. Oops, I'm muted. Oh, dear.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Andrew seems to be a physicist that believes in relativity and doesn't agree with us dissidents who think relativity is wrong. And he's making claims that we think are false about it. I pointed out this Dr. Cynthia Whitney who found out relativity doesn't work. And so hopefully he will bear in mind that everybody doesn't believe the same sort of things as he believes.
Right,
So,
and I was specifically commenting on his calling me a liar.
Yeah, well, for
now let me make on GPS. Let me make one clarifying point. I talked about how GPS does not use special relativity, and how Ron Hatch points out that GPS disproves special relativity. But just to be clear, GPS, the original gravitational field equations, are not relativistic. They added some relativistic parts to general relativity later. Mm-hmm. And the effect of gravitational potential, which is based using a preferred frame, namely the Earth, the physical Earth itself. Now, you can't use every single frame. That part, the data is consistent with general relativity, which again, that equation is a non-relativistic equation, and it has a specific cause and effect.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to put that in. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So. Okay, so back to this. Thank you, Nick. So we move through. So back to Andrew, who seems to be a physicist who believes in relativity, and he's saying physics isn't philosophy, which is false. It is, I pointed out, based upon philosophical ideas such as the idea of automatism, and unfortunately, when they teach physics, they miss out all the philosophy side of it, and they just get straight into doing things like mathematics and telling you the theory, and then telling you what experiments they think support that theory, and they miss out the philosophy of how you're supposed to interpret things. And the philosophy of how you interpret things is supposed to be now sort of like coming from what Einstein was saying. So they miss out that there was a different way of interpreting things before Einstein came along. And so it's all been biased now towards thinking in terms of how Einstein likes to think about things. And so the other thing he says here about Aristotle came out with entirely sound philosophical cosmology. It's 100% wrong compared to reality. Well, I've looked into Aristotle, and unfortunately Aristotle's getting misrepresented as well. If I can, I can't remember what the I can't remember what references I was reading, but if I can go to AI, so good. Yeah, bring another thing up. So present, share screen. It's slow to get these things up. There we go. Share. So this is what AI says about it. Say AI is saying, the Google AI is saying, yeah, Aristotle has been, some of Aristotle's ideas, particularly concerning tragedy and physics, have been subject to misinterpretations and mistranslations, leading to common misconceptions about his views. And he gives an example, and it then goes into a bit more details, but I've looked into Aristotle in quite a bit more detail, and unfortunately, I don't think we've got the original writings of Aristotle. What we have is later writers writing about Aristotle, so you've got their interpretation imposed upon what they think Aristotle meant, and so it ends up with what Aristotle is saying has been misunderstood and mistranslated because it's gone through numerous translations. And so what he's actually saying is not the same as how it's been misrepresented as. So I find that sort of thing happens a lot in physics, because I go back to Einstein in the original German, and I look at how he's been translated into English and say, well, it's not the same thing. They're not doing a proper translation into English. And it's the same sort of thing with Aristotle. He writes this thing, and then it gets translated by later translators, and it gets distorted into something else. So Aristotle's views on physics have been misrepresented. So when he's saying about Aristotle being wrong, well, that's only based upon how he has been misunderstood. And it's the same sort of thing that just keeps carrying on now with modern physics. So, where are we now with the comments? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of comments here, and then it's just difficult to pick out the relevant ones. So I suppose this is Andrew's comment back to what Nick was saying. Nick was given a reference, and Andrew seems to be disputing that reference. So Andrew is calling it lie. Should we really saying something like, I don't believe what he said, and that's more relevant. Because if you go into relativity, you've got two types of truth, really. You've got absolute truth and you've got relative truth. In absolute truth, everybody believes the same version of truth. But when you've got relative truth, person A can have their view of what truth is relative to themselves, and person B can have truth relative to what they believe. And so what A believes is not the same as what B believes. And so the truth is then relative. And with Einstein's relativity, where he starts making things relative, then truth becomes relative as well. Instead of absolute, where everybody agrees on the same truth then becomes relative to each other. So when person A says, oh, I believe such thing, but when they look at person B believing something else, they should be saying, I don't believe what B believes. What B believes is relative to what their version of truth is, but it's not the same as my version of truth. And so it's better to say that rather than come out straight out and call person B lying. And so A might not believe the same thing as B, but truth is now relative. And so you've got this problem of what really is truth when you brought in this relativity stuff. And so a lot of philosophers who are dissidents don't like relativity, because Einstein brought this thing of relative truth in and sort of like did away with absolute truth. So Andrew says, Nick, come back next week with a CERN experiment using GCI and prove me wrong. So what do you mean prove me wrong? You just don't agree with your interpretation, Andrew. We've got these experiments, and such as the SANAC experiment, and we don't agree with the interpretation being posed on them by people who believe in relativity. So Raymond says, Andrew Castro, why do you attend these live streams that usually question SR with special relativity ? So Andrew says, I'll be back next week. Probably means next week. I'll be back next week, Nick. Try not to forget the paper. In fact, you can kick Roger off and present the research. Oh, call in. Well, next week I'm not scheduled to do a talk. I think it's Ian Karen, and so it's not my turn for giving talks. So, Andrew, if you want to give a talk, contact us and we'll try to schedule you in. But most of the talk times are booked. They are fun. Yeah. Well, I think this comment to me said, wouldn't you agree that Aristotle was revolutionary in his time? Well, for my study of Aristotle, I think he's was very good. It's unfortunately what he's been saying is gone through various other people and had been misunderstood. So, Raymond says, Andrew, would you say you're open to the idea that special relativity is more wrong than right, if not completely wrong? I don't know. I don't see a comment from Andrew replying to that. I want blue and violet light. Well, I'll pass on that. I don't know. Question says, is it possible that some experiments get set up with the experimenters having preconceived bias, which could affect the results and interpretation? Yeah, that's the philosophy. That is the philosophy thing. When people are physicists, when they're doing experiments, they don't address the issue of the philosophy of which they're using to interpret experiments. And we can see a quite clear difference that Einstein had his philosophy of how to interpret experiments, and before Einstein, there was sort of like a different sort of philosophy in physics. And so that's one of the big changes he made. He changed his philosophy. So I think I've covered up. I think I've covered up all the comments here. I don't know if I see any more coming along. I'm fairly up to date on them. Let's see if I've got any hands raised in the. No. I think Nick has other engagements elsewhere, so I think he's too busy to come back now. So I think I've covered all the comments, and so if I get back to my slides at the stage. Yes, excellent. So relevant one. This is this transcript of what they were talking about in the video clip I showed you, and what Einstein and the others were talking about was something which was said in the White House. So, so it says here, a soft sunset is one in which you do not alert the people who are being downsized that they are being taken off. What you want the people to think that they're still working on important problems and they don't even realize that they're being phased out. They're being sunsetted. So the question is, what was Mark Anderton talking about when he came to the White House comments on theoretical physics? And it is our lack of ability to move the Lagrangian of the universe beyond 1973 part of a soft sunset of theoretical physics. Question mark, because that's exactly the time when quantum gravity is debuted as a concept. You don't find essentially any mention of quantum gravity before the early 1970s if you look at Google engrams. So the key question is, did we get soft sunsetted? Question mark. It is there in chemical and in chemistry that you have a concept of an inhibitor, which is something you add to an ongoing reaction to stop the reaction. Imagine that effectively what we had was we had that theoretical physicist hitting it out of the park, and then suddenly they became very unsuccessful. At exactly that moment, we start to see the appearance of quantum gravity, and then 10 years later, we see the appearance of string theory. Did we get soft sunsetted, and we didn't get the courtesy call that Anderson and Howitz did? So he's pointing out probably what happened in the 1970s was this soft sunset going on, and not everybody was told that this soft sunset was going on. And from the point of view of those distance who don't agree with Einstein's relativity, maybe the same sort of thing happened with where we got soft sunsetted with that, with the people who were criticizing Einstein's relativity got soft sunsetted, and where they tried to replace all those critics, get rid of them, and just keep people who were saying that relativity was right. And that is kind of a psychological trick they managed to play on us, where we appear to be an open society where we can talk about different things, but in the end, they want academia to have only one sort of point of view on certain topics. And they use this trick of soft sunsetting, which is an idea which it's used used by employers to get rid of employees they decide that they don't need anymore, rather than firing or sacking an employee, which cause a terrible stink. they try a process of soft sunsetting that employee. But the employee will get so cheesed off that he wants to leave. Right, so there was a great more other interesting things being said in that podcast or video between Weinstein and the others, but it was about which was touched more upon the UFO issue. So we could think of this if they're trying to cover up things in theoretical physics by this tactic of soft sunset, then it would be tied into trying to cover up the UFO thing as well. But I've not gone into that UFO side of things. I was just picking up on this theoretical physics issue. Then in this transcript bit, they're pointing out, should we add this conspiracy theory to all the other conspiracies, such as the JFK conspiracy and all that? Okay, I think that's it then. Thank you. I see the comments. I don't think anything else is coming through. I think Andrew might have gone now. So, thank you. Another. Oh no, Nick's back again. I thought Nick was going. Hello, Nick.
I put into the chat a link to the paper, a specific paper for Andrew Castro. Although in the future, I'm not going to volunteer to be his tutor. That would be a full-time job, I think. So if you could, can you put that into the chat for Andrew?
I don't see it. I don't.
Down at the bottom, it should be for the green room chat. Last. Yeah. I'm not able to access. I wasn't able to access the other two chats, but.
Okay, let's see. I'll go to the other chat. Private chat. Let's see.
And in particular, section 3 for him.
Copy.
There's a link, HTTPS.
Yeah, hold on. Paste. Is that it? You see in the chat now?
Do you see it?
Is that it?
And Andrew, look at in particular section 3.
Okay.
There are many others, but
Yeah.
I have 300 members in the CNPS I attend to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Good. I'll look into it. You realise what you put in the private chat doesn't get saved.
Oh, okay.
I prefer it just to go in the public chat.
Okay.
So I'm reading all that now. So it's hard and soft sunsetting. I suppose so, yeah.
Hard sunset.
I think the idea was soft sunsetting was the person being sunsetted doesn't know that they're being sunsetted. And if you're hard sunsetting, then you're telling the person they're being sunsetted.
Yeah, like you're fired.
Well, if you say you're fired, then that's explicit, isn't it? So it's not really a sunset.
That's a hard sunset.
If you're fired, you then go into the industrial tribunals complaining that you're being unfairly fired.
Yes, yes, yes.
But if you're soft sunsetting, you don't realise you were fired. They got rid of you without firing you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Cheers. I think I'm calling it a day now. It's a day. Right. Cheers. Thank you. Oh, I tried to remove you. Right. Remove. Cheers. Thank you. Yeah. In the comment here, somebody saying, yeah, I think Andrew isn't here anymore. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. So and so this is what was provided by Nick Percival for Andrew Castro when Andrew Castro was complaining about things. And it's an issue that what people who believe in relativity have got a distorted belief from the point of view of us people who think that Einstein's relativity is wrong. Okay, thank you. That's the end of this little talk. So what was interesting is when I accidentally stumbled upon this term of soft sunsetting, and I came to realize, yeah, that must be the tactic that the academia is using in the mainstream physics community. They're trying to get rid of critics of relativity by this method of soft sunsetting. They want academia just to be full of people who support Einstein's relativity, and they're not wanting academia to get any more critics of relativity than joined into the academia. So you had all these great critics of Einstein's relativity in the past, like Lewis Easton, and they haven't created a new generation to come into academia. So thank you. That's the end of this little talk then. Thank you. Bye then. And I'm closing down now. One end stream. End stream. Oh, let me come on here. I found some comments here. Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Roger. Nice to be here. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. End streaming out. Okay. Thank you. So next week it's Ian Karen's turn again. End stream.